listener production.
Hey, welcome to The Briefing. I'm Sasha Barbagat. 2024 has become the deadliest year for aid workers. Among the dead, Australian Zomi Frankham, who had been delivering life-saving assistance in Gaza when she was killed. So what is it like doing one of the most dangerous jobs in one of the most dangerous places in the world?
I think the second day I was in Gaza, there was a heavy bombardment from all around. And I'm quite seasoned, but I must admit I was very scared. And looking around, I could look out the window and I could see children, while these very large missile strikes were taking place, they weren't flinching.
Roger Hearn is UNRWA's Director of Relief and Social Services, and he joins Antoinette Lattouf in this episode of The Briefing to discuss. First, though, it's time for the headlines with Chris Spiru. It's Tuesday, December 3.
Morning, Sash. Morning, everybody. Joe Biden has made history with the presidential pardon of his son, Hunter Biden. Now, the American system is set up to give presidents this power, and Biden's predecessors have given clemency to friends, family members, donors, and political allies in the past, but never to their own children. Hunter has been pardoned for criminal convictions on gun and tax charges, both of which he was due to be sentenced over at the end of the month. The 54-year-old was found guilty in June of lying about his drug use on a form when buying a handgun, which carried a maximum sentence of 25 years. He was also facing as much as 17 years in prison after pleading to and being found guilty of 9 charges of tax fraud. The pardon has sparked controversy, partly because until now, the US president had consistently said he would not intervene in his son's criminal cases.
I am satisfied that I'm not going to do anything. I said I abide by the jury decision, and I will do that, and I will not pardon him.
In a statement, Biden has defended his decision, saying the cases against his son are politically motivated. The White House, too, has defended the outgoing president, saying that he wrestled with the decision. But a number of Republicans have publicly called him a liar. And Donald Trump, meantime, has used the opportunity to draw a comparison to the January 6 rioters who have been imprisoned for their insurrection. The president-elect asking if they, too, will be pardoned. Now, Hunter himself has issued a statement saying, "I will never take the clemency I have been given today for granted and will devote the life I have rebuilt to helping those who are still sick and suffering." This is a really interesting one, Chris, because I think the deeper issue, aside from Joe Biden saying he wasn't going to do something and now he's done it, is this entanglement that is increasingly being seen between politics and the rule of law in America. And it's a line that is increasingly being blurred, and that is then seeding distrust of the system among everyday people in the US. And so this is what is driving people to vote for people like Donald Trump. Would he have made the same decision had Kamala Harris won? I don't know. And this is my own opinion, but this really feels like Joe Biden just throwing his hands up in the air and going, whatever. Yeah. Because I look at it as him going, well, my opponent's done it and will do similar things when he's in office, if not worse. The majority of Americans voted for him, so why can't I just do it? That's how it feels, that this decision, and it could have long-term ramifications for the Democrats going forward as well. I read also a bit of analysis on The Guardian, and they summed it up quite well. They said, was this a loving act of mercy by a father who has already known much sorrow, or a hypocritical political manoeuvre reminiscent of his great foe? Maybe both can be true.
In his statement, he said that the reason that he's doing this is because the charges against his son and the cases against his son were politically motivated. At the end of the day, Hunter's done the wrong thing. He's done the wrong thing on 2 occasions. He's been found out on 2 occasions. He's been found guilty on 2 occasions. To say that it's politically motivated, to me, I understand the element of it being brought to the court's attention. I get that. But at the end of the day, this is justice in action. So for Biden to then go and undo the work of the courts and the judiciary and juries, to me, I've got a big question mark there, and I'm going, okay, what's going on here? And it's, like you said, it's whether or not he's lost hope, whether or not he's just now fighting dirty. I get that as well, but I just don't love it. I don't love it. And I can see this being a key point for a lot of Democrats when, maybe they're losing hope and faith in the party. And look, it is important to note that in 2020, Trump as well used this presidential power. He pardoned Charles Kushner, so he's the father-in-law of his daughter, Ivanka. Kushner was sentenced to 2 years in prison in 2004 for charges including tax evasion, campaign finance offences, and witness tampering. He's also just been tapped on the shoulder by Trump to be the US ambassador to France. So take with that what you will. Again, there is a history here. So in 2001, Bill Clinton pardoned his younger half-brother Roger Clinton for a cocaine-related offence that dated back to 1985. But Biden's is different though, because the pardons in those cases came after the sentences had been served, not before. So it is a first on many fronts here, Sash.
Back home, the Australian Federal Police have arrested and charged 13 people in what it's describing as the country's biggest ever cocaine bust. The AFP has charged 11 men and 2 teens in Queensland over an alleged conspiracy to import more than 2 tonnes of cocaine into the country by sea. The drugs have an estimated street value of $760 million. That's the equivalent of 11.7 million individual street deals. So, how did it happen? Well, on Saturday night, police had been tracking a recreational fishing boat that had been travelling out to sea. That's where it allegedly met a mothership to collect the cocaine before it tried to get away but broke down off the coast of Gurry, formerly known as Fraser Island.
Yeah, 2 men were arrested on that vessel. Another 2 waiting onshore to allegedly collect the drugs were also taken into custody, along with 9 others on land who are believed to have been part of the plot. All 13 were charged with conspiracy to import a commercial quantity of drugs, which, if convicted, carries a life sentence. And police will allege one of the men arrested was the vice president of the Brisbane chapter of the Comancheros.
And this past spring has been declared Australia's hottest ever, with mean temperatures 2 degrees above the long-term average. Now, it also sits 2.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. Our minimum temperatures, so how cool it got at night, also broke the 2-degree record and were the warmest on record. I think you're hearing the trend here, Chris. Interestingly, rainfall as well was above average, sitting at about 28%. And it was in the wettest 10% of all springs since 1900 for most of WA and the Northern Territory, as well as parts of Queensland, New South Wales and South Australia. We're in Sydney, Chris. It has been hot for the last week and a bit. I think we had a couple of days where it was a little bit cooler. I feel like because we've had La Nina-dominated weather cycles for the last few years, the start of summer has come slowly and it's been much cooler and wet. Now we're getting hot and wet, which is my most hated type of weather.
Yeah, it's gone from like really extreme heat to extreme rainfall, and it's like we're talking sideways rainfall. It's been horrendous the past few days in Sydney. Although I did enjoy the beach yesterday, I'm not going to lie to you. It was amazing being out in the sun. And look, much of the country is bracing for hot and humid weather this week too, with the bomb saying large swathes of the country will be sitting between 4 and 8 degrees above average. So that's in parts of New South Wales, Western Australia, South Australia and Victoria. They're all going to be hot, so make sure you slip, slop, slap and take full advantage of the sun. Midweek temperatures over eastern Western Australia could even reach around 47 degrees. So only a few degrees below Australia's December record of 49.9 degrees at Nullarbor in 2019. Also, severe storms are possible today from Victoria through to Western Queensland and again later in the week. Wow, I never thought I was going to be a weatherman, but hey, Mum, look, I'm doing it.
I just want to quickly as well just reflect a change in the slip, slop, slap messaging since we have been in school. It's now slip, slop, slap, seek and slide. You're supposed to seek shade and slide on a pair of sunnies, as well as slip on a long sleeve shirt, slop on sunscreen and slap on a hat. Just for anyone listening who needed a reminder of that very important message as we head into a hot Aussie summer. Chris, thank you so much for joining us for the headlines. Next up, we are talking about what it's like to be an aid worker in Gaza. It's an incredible chat with Antoinette Lattouf and Roger Hearn. Stick around for it.
Roger Hearn is an Australian aid worker who used to live in Gaza for years, and he's now UNRWA's Director of Relief and Social Services. And Roger has just returned from Gaza. And it comes as the devastating death toll of humanitarian workers continue. Just over the weekend, aid workers from Save the Children and World Central Kitchen were killed in Israeli airstrikes. It's forced World Central Kitchen to suspend operations after losing 3 of its staff members. 2024 is now the deadliest year for aid workers. Most of those fatalities have been from UNRWA. And Israel just passed a law to ban the Palestinian arm of the UN charity. UNRWA's Director of Relief and Social Services, Roger, is in the studio with me today, but recently returned from Gaza. Roger, what was Gaza like when you were first there, and how did it compare on your last visit?
I've been working in aid since the mid-1990s, when I basically started to do a PhD on UN peacekeeping. I got very interested in international affairs, worked for Oxfam Australia and a whole range of other places. I first went to Gaza when I first started working with UNRWA in 2002. And Gaza in those days, it was during the Second Intifada, so things were tough. There was bombings going on, but it was still a very nice place to be. Gazans were exceptionally nice people to be around. I met my Danish wife there, so I have very fond memories of Gaza.
Compared to now, what's it like?
There is no comparison to now. You know, you can't actually see the Gaza that was there in the past. It doesn't exist anymore. In a sense, it's been obliterated. You literally don't recognise things that you see.
What was that like for you to witness that?
It was stunning. It was surreal, because you think that you should be able to see things that you know and you remember, but they're just simply not there. And in a sense, the people, you know, we talk about the resilience of Palestinians. They're still incredibly resilient, but in a sense, a lot of the spirit from people I've known for many, many years has really, it feels a little bit broken. It's quite tragic. And I think that hurt more than the physical destruction.
And how much life-saving aid is currently reaching Gaza?
Look, we have had so much trouble getting food and supplies into Gaza really since the start of this crisis. People like to talk in terms of truck numbers. It's a little bit of a fake sort of way of calculating things, but it's sort of helpful just to give you a picture. Before the war, before the October 7, we saw literally around 500 trucks a day. And that wasn't sort of a huge amount of stuff, but it was just enough to keep Gaza alive and functioning. Now we're seeing, I think over the last month, we've seen around 60 trucks a day coming into Gaza. So that gives you an indication of the marked decrease.
We've seen with the ICC arrest warrant for Netanyahu, one of the things he's accused of is using starvation as a weapon of war. Were you able to see the starvation in the Palestinian people?
Absolutely. You see children literally going through garbage, and there are piles and piles of trash. I remember one image just as I was leaving, seeing a dead horse and a child very close nearby, basically picking through food nearby. It's really dismal. You see children, lined up like you do some of the television footage of children scrambling to get food. You see people waiting. I was in a shelter that we run, which we don't have enough food to feed the people, the 8,000 people in that particular shelter. There were elderly people literally grabbing at me, begging for food. It was really hideous.
We're seeing conflicting reports as to why the aid trucks can't enter, being refused, having lots of bureaucratic paperwork holding them up, as well as looting. Where are we up to now? What is the greatest obstacle?
Look, I think it's a whole collection of factors that basically have meant that not enough aid is getting in. Yes, there are bureaucratic elements. We rushed to get food earlier this year, purchased in Egypt. We still have around 450 trucks of that aid sitting in the Sinai, months and months later, literally sitting there, and some of that food is starting to go off, which is just devastating. We have the equivalent of thousands of truckloads of flour and food kits in Ashdod Port. In Israel, we can't get that through because there are all sorts of really laborious bureaucratic things that you have to do to get things through. So they won't just release consignments as they go. They will demand the whole consignment is inspected first. And then we have this situation of looting. And it's basically made our aid distribution almost completely untenable. We had around 105 trucks a couple of weeks ago. 98 of those trucks were looted.
And these are Palestinians looting?
These are Palestinians looting, but they're criminal gangs. So, yes, there have been examples in the past of people literally out of sheer desperation hoarding around a truck and mobbing a truck. This is very organised. It's by armed actors, and it's very close to a highly militarised zone controlled by the Israelis. Just as you go into Gaza, near Karim Shalom, literally 200 or 300 metres from some Israeli tanks, you see 20, 30 men sitting very relaxed on the side of the road. Some of them are armed, and they obviously feel emboldened enough to sit there and wait for our trucks to come through.
And from your understanding and what you've witnessed, does the IDF do anything to ensure safe passage of those trucks?
We haven't had safe passage of those trucks, so no, I don't think I could draw that conclusion.
Since October 7, at least 249 UNRWA staff have been killed in Gaza, and the UN have said 2024 is the deadliest year for aid workers, with almost 290 killed. Most are in Gaza, 4 just over the weekend. Can you paint a picture of what it's like on the ground to be an aid worker?
It's incredibly dangerous. We have people who have been killed distributing aid. We have people who've been killed looking for shelter, looking for food for their families. Actually, a man I recruited 22 years ago, Jamal, who was looking, had been displaced multiple times. He was looking for a new shelter because he'd just been displaced again in Rafah for himself and his 4 children, was killed. So, those sorts of stories happen all the time of people literally just trying to survive. But we've had our warehouses hit. We've had around 190 of our installations either destroyed or badly damaged. And in those attacks, we have staff killed and we have ordinary people killed. It's just devastating.
So is it your belief that you're being targeted?
It's hard to say. I feel Gaza's being targeted. It feels so indiscriminate at times in terms of the sorts of destruction that you see. The World Central Kitchen on the weekend, What I've heard directly was that there was an attack on that vehicle, a strike on that vehicle. A crowd came to try to rescue people, and then another strike occurred on that vehicle. So things like that are happening. It's hard to attribute direct targeting, but it's made our work it's incredibly difficult.
Israel has recently banned UNRWA from operating on its soil. That comes into effect late January. It's for a range of reasons, but one of which is alleging that members of the group were involved in the October 7 attacks. Now, as I understand, there was an investigation which found that maybe 9 of the 13,000 members had some involvement, or they couldn't prove that there wasn't an involvement. Now, with the World Central Kitchen workers, 3 of which were killed, Israel is also making the accusation that at least 1 was involved in October 7. This is an accusation their families deny. My question to you, Roger, is how susceptible are aid groups to violent infiltration?
We take any neutrality breach that is reported to us incredibly seriously. The problem that we have faced over the past 12 months is that every allegation made about our staff has been made through the media. So there's not a genuine sort of attempt to have dialogue with UNRWA about, okay, we have these concerns, can you help us actually try to investigate this? We basically see allegations in the media, either directly through the Israeli government or through some of their sort of supporting organisations. So we don't actually feel that the attacks on UNRWA and the Knesset bills are necessarily connected to a concern about terrorism. As a matter of fact, what we would basically posit is that really since October 7, Israel has had as a stated war aim the elimination of UNRWA. And the reason they want to eliminate UNRWA is not because of concerns around neutrality, but it's because we remind people that there are Palestine refugees. And there is this very naive view that if you destroy UNRWA, that you, in a sense, you get rid of the Palestine refugees, which is, of course, farcical. The whole sort of resolutions around refugees predates UNRWA, but that appears to be the aim.
There's just 2 months to go before the UNRWA ban kicks in, and our Foreign Minister Penny Wong has said that UNRWA does life-saving work that should continue. What urgent actions should the Australian government be taking right now?
We are really arguing that Israel has had a long history with UNRWA. They've been supporting UNRWA since the 1950s. They also have a very strong relationship with the State of Israel, and we feel that they could play a really strong role in terms of really pursuing the importance of UNRWA with the Israeli government. We would also like to see all governments really call out some of the misinformation that's made about UNRWA. Unfortunately, no international media is allowed into Gaza. So in a sense, all sorts of myths and in a sense, bogus claims can be made about the agency. And we would really like to see these being called out, particularly around the fact that food is not getting into Gaza in sufficient quantities.
Gaza also now has the largest population of paediatric amputees in recorded history, and schools that are run by UNRWA have been shut for over a year. In your experience, in your many years' experience as an aid worker, will Palestinian children ever truly recover from this?
Look, there is going to be so much long-term work required in terms of not just dealing with the physical injuries, but also the psychological scarring. Having children, literally, this is their second year out of school. Half the population are children in Gaza. It's completely devastating. I think one thing that really struck me while I was there, I think the second day I was in Gaza, there was a heavy bombardment from all around. And I'm quite seasoned, but I must admit I was very scared. And looking around, I could look out the window and I could see children, while these very large missile strikes were taking place, they weren't flinching. Whatever they were doing, They didn't flinch, which just strikes me. I'm not a psychologist, but it just strikes me as something so dangerous for children. And when you think about the long-term security of Israel, if that's what the concern is, surely there must be a concern of basically depriving children of school, of a normal life for 2 years. And our infrastructure, sadly, is so badly destroyed. The schools are now shelters. Many of them have been completely destroyed. It's going to be so difficult to rebuild that education system, which is devastating for the future.
Sadly, at this point of the year, there is a lot of compassion fatigue, also with all the headlines that aid is not getting into Gaza. What's your message then to Australians who either think, I can't think of that conflict anymore, or even if I do help, it won't reach them?
I think it's just so important to really think about if you and your family were in a situation that I've been trying to describe over the last few weeks. I've seen so many families in Gaza, families struggling with an elderly member, families struggling with children with disabilities, and really just trying to get by. It's a level of deprivation that you couldn't believe. We actually had our senior psychologist trying to offer support to our staff in Gaza, and one thing that female members of staff were talking about is that they were embarrassed and ashamed to go to work because they no longer had underwear, they no longer had any sanitary sort of supplies, so they were cutting squares from the blankets on the side of their tent to basically be able to go to work while they were menstruating. It's that level of deprivation. I think for families and for people in Australia to really recognise that, could you imagine being in the same clothes for 14 months, having been displaced 14 times, 15 times, 20 times, having lost family members, knowing that your house is destroyed? I think it's just really important to conceptualise that and to support organisations that are trying to provide aid.
Roger, thank you so much for sharing those very harrowing details with us.
Thank you.
Roger Hearn, UNRWA's Director of Relief and Social Services. You can visit UNRWA's website if you wish to donate. Palestine is undoubtedly the most dangerous place to be an aid worker, but in Sudan, 25 humanitarian workers have also been killed. The death toll is 11 in Ukraine and 11 in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Briefing. That's it for now. If you want to keep up with our other content, you can check us out on Instagram @The Briefing Podcast and on TikTok and YouTube. Search Listener Newsroom. We'll be back in your feed with another episode this afternoon from 3. I'm Antoinette Lattouf. Catch you next time.
Listener.